Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have a flick-through review of Tactica Medieval rulebook. This is going to be the first part of our review. We're going to review the pitched battle rules, and then in the second part I'm going to review the siege rules, and there is also a section with campaign rules that I haven't read yet, and I may showcase it as well. So let's start with the book quickly. Here we have welcoming notes and a description of the philosophy from the authors Artie Conliffe and Ed Regendahl, if I spell the names or pronounce names correctly. So here we have the rules, and we have the index, and we have the rules. We start with game preparation, game scales, mounting system, ground scale, troop types. Then we continue. There's some very nice pictures from old miniatures. These are Essex Knights, and then we go to the troops. There are 4 types of troops. So you have your heavy cavalry, you have your skirmish infantry, you have your heavy infantry, and your light cavalry. Some of these troops, depending on the order of battle that is part of this book, will be considered mass troops. Some others can be deployed as mass or even skirmish. So depending on how you want to prepare your army and your strategy, you will deploy accordingly if the order of battle allows it. Now we have general organization and unit organization. Anatomy of the unit. So here the unit is basically based on individual miniatures. You can play with any type of basing. This is basically the strength of the unit. So if you can portray it, then this doesn't matter if you have individual miniatures. And this game does not remove miniatures. It puts some kind of markings showing the deterioration of the unit. So he explains to here what is exhausted units, and that it means that if you reach 25% of your original strength, then you go to the army general and the sequence of play. Now, how the sequence of play works: so you're dicing for both players, dicing for initiative. If you win the initiative, you move first, but your opponent moves directly after you. So it's I go, you go. If you win the initiative, in the next initiative, you add modifiers, negative modifiers. And if you win it again, you add more negative modifiers. So basically, at a point, you will lose the initiative. Then you go to movement phase, missile fire phase, melee phase, and breakthrough movement phase. Here, of course, the authors show you a figure mounting system that they are following in the rules. But again, as I told you, it doesn't really, and I will show you with my DBX based miniatures, it doesn't really affect the game at all. Here we have very quickly, we'll talk about deployment. The deployment is quite strict. They have restricted areas, specific units that can be deployed in the flank and in the rear, and specific units can be deployed in the main battle line. You have the 6-inch zone. That is a zone that is you're not allowed to cross up to a certain point. Then we talk about formations and depth. Now, why I like this section? Because basically you can deploy your armies as you want. You want it to have a great frontage and roll more dice, or you want it to have a depth, and the superior depth will give them extra dice, but a smaller frontage maybe could be outflanked easily. It has a smaller frontage than a wider frontage, but at the same time, maybe with a smaller frontage, you won't be obliged to fight 2 opponents and divide your dice, as we're going to see later, and you can fight only one. So the things that you have to think about: battles, battle organization. We have a battle command radius. Now, what is this? The battle command radius is the commander's radius. It's 12 inches for cavalry and 8 inches for infantry. So depending on what unit you have, they have a different command radius. Then we're talking about here the battle commanders. Battle commanders move 12 inches. They can move however they want, and they move first in the movement phase. The units then can move according to the range. They can go out of range as long as in the next movement phase the commander who moves first goes to the position that places them in range. Massed units command radius, as I said, is different depending, and skirmish and skirmish command radius. You see different units have different command radius, and armies that are not using battles here. All armies are using battles, but some of them are not. In the deployment, you have to divide your armies into 3 battles. Every battle has a commander. Here again, we're talking about movement and about pre-measurement. You can pre-measure, and about how heavy infantry is dismounted and how skirmishers and infantry and cavalry work. This is how the skirmish operating system works. The skirmishers are based on individual miniatures, but they have to be in a specific distance from each other, and they move as a mass. It's a very interesting rule. I haven't really encountered this rule before. I have to go into detail to explain to you, and I won't do it justice, but it's very innovative, although one quite old rule set. Now we have here skirmish infantry, skirmish light cavalry, cavalry movement, heavy cavalry, and knights dismounting your cavalry. And then we go to light cavalry, moving from mass to skirmish formation. This is an option. Then you go to light cavalry about face. The movement is quite cumbersome, quite strict. Mass units move straight, or they can turn 2 inches, but they cannot do both. Heavy cavalry, massed heavy cavalry can turn first and then move 4 inches, and then move 8 or 12 inches depending on how you want, but they cannot move and turn. Other units move more freely, like the skirmish unit or the lighter units, but the massed units move quite cumbersomely. So wheeling procedures, as you can see here, well, very standard. You can see it in many rule sets. And wheeling restrictions. The charge movement, basically the charge movement is a movement that contacts your opponent. And then we go to special charge movement, and then go to obligatory movement. Special charge movement is what? Is because the rules is I go, you go. If you don't move a unit in your turn, and then it's the turn of your opponent and moves its units, and suddenly a new unit becomes eligible for charging, this unit that did not move during your turn, you can use it and charge again. So you can charge and then charge again if if a target appears after the movement of your opponent. So that's quite interesting, because you can plan ahead. You can stop moving your units and some specific units and wait to see what your opponent will do and then charge him. Obligatory movement, and this is where the game is different from other games. Now, obligatory movement, I would like to read it to you. So once deployed, units moved, were committed against the enemy. It was difficult for a general to exercise precise control over them. This was particularly true for medieval armies, which in general lacked both disciplined and flexible command control system. The rules of obligatory movement force players to plan more thoroughly before committing their units. Simply stated, obligatory movement obliges players to continue moving massed units they have previously moved, even if this forces a player to charge into melee contact. Obligatory movement may begin immediately after deployment. Obligatory movement applies to all massed units except for massed light cavalry, which may stop and go as desired. So this is a very interesting rule. So what's happening here, you have infantry obligatory movement and heavy cavalry obligatory movement and exceptions. So if your massed infantry moves more than 2 inches during the battle, considering that the movement is 8 inches, and that's something that obviously you will need to do, it has to keep moving or wheeling 2 inches until the end of the battle. That means that the armies are not easily controlled. Heavy cavalry, in the same time, as soon as it moves, then it has to continue moving at least 4 inches per turn. I find this rule maybe frustrating, but extremely interesting. I can imagine at a point, as it was in the medieval battles, you feeling like you don't have control over your army or over your massed units. So I find this rule very interesting. So here we're talking about longbows. A lot of rules about longbows and missile fire. Here we have missile fire, maximum range 15 inches for bowman, for crossbowman 15, mounted bowman 15, and skirmishers, etc. How you shoot, we'll go very quickly. It's based on your flank lines. You can see your range. Your range is the flank lines, and you have 15 inches. Anything any unit within your flank lines is a target, and then accordingly you will divide the dice depending on the percentage you see that is visible. Every miniature or every strength, you can see the strength rolls, every 2 miniatures you roll 1 dice, so these miniatures who are 16, I think, you roll 8 dice to hit your opponent. So here it gives you an example. So you have approximately 1 shot for this unit, 3 shots for this unit, and 2 shots for this unit. You have also massed unit arc of fire that explains to you, and also massed unit fire eligibility. Again, there are quite a few rules regarding skirmish and horse archers and blocked fire and overhead fire. As you can see, a lot of good rules and missile that I'm not going to go into detail now. I'm just going to give you the feel of the game and talk to you about some specific rules that I found very interesting, like the obligatory movement. Now we'll talk about missile morale checks and basically morale checks, how they work. I will try to explain to you both morale checks so you can understand. So let's go to the quick reference sheet and see. So in the top here, you have the unit strength. So let's say you have a unit of 32 strength. As soon as you lose 4 from shooting, you have, this is your first milestone, you have to roll and see if you're going to have a missile halt. Basically, if you fail, your unit must stop for the next round. So in order, if you lose 4 from the strength, you need to roll a 2 and above with a 2d6 in order to pass the test. Now your next milestone, if you have a 32 strength unit, it's 7. Not 5, it's 7. So when you reach 7 hits, or when you reach the reduction of your strength to 7, you have to roll above 3, and so on and so forth up to the end. You see, every strength has a different sequence. Now we'll go very quickly to melee break test and routed into test. It's the same. The same happens with melee break tests, but the rolling starts when you lose half of your strength. So you see, your first die roll should be d10, so you have to roll above d10 in order to pass the morale test. And for example, for a unit of 24 strength, the morale test will be at 12, so when you are at half, and then of course it goes to 15 and then to 17. Now routed into test, I will go. It will be when units break, when friendly units break, they have a routing path that is 6 inches straight behind. If this path crosses or even touches you, you have to take a routed into test. Similar concept, similar mechanics. So depending on how many miniatures you have, so this, if you had a 32 strength unit, but now you lost 10 and you are 22 strength, you cross to the column and you see that you need to roll an 8 in order not to get disordered and be affected by the routed unit that route into you. So depending on how many strength you have from the original, how much the deduction is, you cross and you see. So if you lost 5 of your original strength and you are 24, you need to roll a 7 and above to avoid these effects of the routing units. This is how all the mechanics work of the game, and as I told you, and morale and in melee. So we continue. I told you about missile morale test. There is also a breakthrough movement. Basically, when you win your opponent, you need to do a breakthrough movement to take its place. General principles of melee. You have massed units melee, skirmish melees, melees between massed and skirmish units. This is not a genuine melee. It occurs when massed units contact skirmish unit and they're dispersing them. Basically, it's quite an interesting rule. Again, here you have another very interesting section of rule sets regarding skirmish melees with the units fighting, the miniatures fighting individually. Really interesting mechanics. Again, I'm not going to go into details. There's a lot of things to be said here, but I was impressed by the mechanics of the skirmish. Now we're talking here about dispersing skirmishers, as I told you, and massed melee, frontal melees, and here how you allocate the dice when you're charging, when it's a flank charge. When you're fighting two opponents, you divide your dice accordingly, and of course, obviously, the depth bonus. In order to get it, you have to have more rows than your opponents, and of course, you must have more than half of your strength of the rows or of your bases in order to count as a base depth. If you have a base depth, if you have advantages, you roll 2d6 per extra row that you are you are deeper. Excuse me. You are deeper than your opponent. So every row you are deeper than your opponent, you roll a 2d6. If you have pikes, you roll 3 for every row you are deeper than your opponent. So again, strategy, as I told you before, you want a wider frontage. There is a chance you will fight more opponents and you will divide your dice. You need a deeper unit. Maybe you won't have 2 opponents, but maybe you will be more easily outflanked. Again, here the rules are talking about how you get flanked, the depth of the cavalry. The cavalry doesn't have a depth unless it's a fighting value 6 cavalry, and it's considered having a depth bonus of 1. What is fighting value? I want to tell you, fighting value basically is what you roll against. So, for example, in melee, if you're rolling 8 dice because you roll 1 per unit fighting in the front, and you roll 8 dice, you need to roll above the fighting value of your opponents. The fighting value can be seen can be found in the orders of battle. So if a fighting value of a unit that has 5 and 6, you need to roll 5 and 6. If you roll 5 and 6, you remove 1 miniature, basically 1 point strength. Now you're talking about flank and rare attacks, where they're devastating. Basically, you cannot do anything if you're charged with flank or rare, and sometimes, depending on the difference between the fighting value of your opponent and yourself, your opponent can double or even triple its dice. Here we have melee priorities, very clearly explained. Always priority is the flank attacks. As soon as you finish the flank attacks, you roll a dice, and the winner of the roll decides the direction. Now, you have melee areas, and let me explain to you what that means. Unit A is fighting Unit 1 and Unit 2. Now, Unit A rolls half, let's say, dice against Unit 1 and half dice against Unit 2. Now, if Unit A loses enough miniatures in order to reach a milestone, so for example, if Unit A has strength of 24, and during the battle with Unit 1 loses 3, let's say loses, 12, and it has to take a melee break test, it will take it before it finishes the melee, because obviously you may break before you fight the second unit. So every time that a milestone is hit on all these morale checks, you need to stop and roll for morale and not wait to finish melee. You need to roll, and then if you pass, then you continue to melee number 2 and go so on and so forth. Again, here they're talking about morale checks. I explained to you how morale checks works and melee direction. Some special considerations about multiple fighting areas and melee morale check procedures and morale check modifiers. Now, what is this? In every order of battle, in every army list, you can find some modifiers for special units, plus or minuses, that will be added during your morale checks. So, for example, some Crusader Knights may have a morale modifier of +2. So when they roll, let's say they lost 9 strength, they're a unit of 24th strength, and they need to roll a 5. If they have a +2 morale modifier, they need to roll a 3. So it makes it more interesting. Obviously, you have minuses. Consequences of failed morale check, broken units, route path. I was talking to you about the route path and how you roll for a routed into test. Simultaneous breaks, morale checks from broken units. Breakthrough movement, this is what I told you before. A victorious unit must move to the position of the destroyed unit. Special breakthrough conditions. Disorder, there is a disorder that the unit will get immediately if it fails routed into test, and then it's removed in the next round if it's not in hand-to-hand combat. Special troops types, as I told you, there are some special troop types. Knights with fighting value of 6, Welsh and English longbowmen. Here again, the stakes, explain you stakes and masked longbow cavalry against stakes. Here again, talking about flank attack. Nice diagrams, it's nice, I like diagrams. And then we have infantry against stakes, rank of depth. You have Swiss, you have melee, you have the Mongols, you have key units, and then it explains to you the terrain, fighting in woods, These are some extra rules for longbows, quite interesting. Streams in melee, fighting with your army, etc. and so forth. And here you go to the seeds supplement. So this is the rule, guys. I hope I explained to you well. Let us go quickly and see the order of battle. As I told you, there is a campaign also, entire campaign here. I will read the rules with the seed supplement and explain to you. So here you see, let's have a look. You have from early medieval, very early medieval armies. Let's see how we read. That's a good one. Let's see here how we read the army list, the order of battle. So B means that the unit has, this army has to be required to be divided in 3 battles. Here, this marker here will be the symbol that this is a key unit, and it counts towards the army breaking point. The army breaking point is here in the corner. In this case, is 12. This is the Teutonic order, the number of the army. This is the unit, order of knights, brethren, the size of the units, the strength basically. What's tactical usage is heavy cavalry or light cavalry. The fighting value I talked to you about, 6, 5, 6, 3 to 6. Melee, what's the melee weapon, the missile weapon, and here is the morale. So they have +3, the order of knights, the brethren have a +1, the crusaders +1. In other army lists you have also minuses. And here are the army lists. They start from Caroline Frankish and they reach up to the Wars of the Roses. Let's go and see some English. Polish, Lithuanian, Scottish, English 100 Years' War. You see here the archers, the size of the unit, the tactical factors, +3 and +1 for knights and men-at-arms, the breaking point, all these are included here. Anyway, guys, the next one will be the siege rules. I hope you enjoyed this flick through. If you have any comments or any questions, please write them in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye-bye.